When we made the album Songs About Jane, we were mostly just opening up for bigger artists. Fast forward into 2004-05, when we're blowing up globally, there was this sense that you only get one shot. It's not going to come again if you don't go after everything. We were very mindful of that and we were up for it, but we just didn't, or I didn't recognize the extent to which it was going to be taxing. When it came to the point where I was breaking down and I really was having problems, it was almost too late at that point.
This week, I'm honored to be joined by associate marriage and family therapist, founding drummer of Maroon 5, and author of his book, Harder to Breathe, Ryan Dusick.
You know, when I left the band, it was devastating on every level because my identity was wrapped up in being a member of that band. I had no real sense of how deep the wound was and how the things that I was doing to escape were making it worse. The gift that comes from that, though, now is recognizing that when I meet people that are in pain, you know, as a therapist now, I can understand it in a way that I think a lot of people that haven't been in that place can't. It was the lowest point in my life, but it was a really deep, dark hole that it was a perfect storm that got me there, and it was a perfect storm that got me out of it. You know, when I see people that are in that place, it's familiar to me, and I understand that you didn't choose to be there. The judgment that we place on people that may not have the best coping skills, you know, whether it be addiction, it's just essentially doing the best you can to try to figure out how to get through this thing that's really, really painful.
I wanted to start today with a quote that I thought was really interesting. And it is, "Life is about rhythm. We vibrate, our hearts are pumping blood. We are a rhythm machine because that's who we are." That quote was from Mickey Hart, who, for anybody who doesn't know, is a drummer from the Grateful Dead. The theme that I want to focus on today is connection, and the connection that we get with music, the connection that we get with something that transcends like the moment, and the connection we have with each other. So when you were first starting your drumming journey, you had it right there in the book where you said, "Dad, I need to get the drums. I feel the drums inside of me." And we see depictions in movies like Whiplash where the drummer is going just in the moment. He feels like he's transcending the here and now. So what does that feel like in real life? When you're first starting out with the drums and you're really falling in love with the process, what does it feel like to transcend the moment and connect with something that feels beyond you?
Well, for me, I don't know why the drums spoke to me the way that they did. I think that my older brother playing the electric guitar was the inspiration originally. And I just wanted to be a part of what he was doing. You know, I saw he had started a band and he was playing in the school band and he was a really good guitar player. And I just saw this sort of community around the music that was really cool. It just seemed like something I wanted to be a part of, something I wanted to connect to.
Yeah.
I don't think I thought that like intellectually at that age. I was only, you know, I was a kid, but I had I think just a sense, a felt sense in my body that banging on the drums with a bunch of other musicians was something really special and a way to sort of express yourself with other people, and in doing so, sort of feel that connection. And so when I started playing the drums, I was really just emulating both my heroes on MTV and then also my older brother and his friends. But very quickly, it became my own passion. It became playing the drums it was freedom to me. It was a sense that all of the other anxieties and insecurities that I might have had elsewhere kind of went away when I was playing the drums, and I could just take out that teenage angst on the drums and cymbals, and then, you know, and being in a band again, it's like it's a microcosm. It's a little community in which you can sort of push and pull and connect with other human beings in a really interesting way that goes beyond words.
No, absolutely. And I want to focus on the band aspect of it all too, where how do they help you and your brother and your dad, anyone who's supporting you really, how do they help you define your own style as a drummer so that you're not just thinking like, oh yeah, I love hitting the drums, like this is awesome, but they take it to that next level where they're like, no, Ryan, like you're really good at hitting the drums, and you know what, you're not just really good, but you also have this unique style that we can really play upon, and I think we can build something here with the band.
Well, I was really lucky to have a family that was really supportive. My parents, as much as they wanted me and my brother to, you know, grow up and go to college and get a real job and all that stuff the parents want, they were also passionate about music and the arts and really supportive of us, you know, pursuing whatever would be fulfilling to us. Um, and in particular, I think my older brother, he was really supportive in a way that at the time I didn't recognize how rare it was. I think having a sibling, an older sibling that you looked up to, that was encouraging and told me, you have a lot of potential, a lot of talent, um, and I think at age 12, 13, 14, that was really important to me, feeling that the drums was a place for me,
Yeah.
and I also was lucky at school. We had a guy named Mr. Castaneras, or Mr. C, we called him, at Brentwood School, that was this sort of, um, I don't know if he was quite my parents' age, but close to it. A guy from the hippie generation, musician, who was just this really cool guy at a school that was otherwise very conservative, and a kind of college prep type school.
Yeah.
He was this very laid back. Well, I don't know if laid back is the right word. He was kind of intense, but he wasn't stuffy, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And he encouraged. He started something called the pep band, which was essentially just a way for us to play rock music in school, and that was really cool. I mean, that was how I got started, and how I was able to get some experience performing and playing with other musicians. Because I was in 8th grade, I think, when I initially joined the pep band, and we would just every month meet in the orchestra room, or even just at our friends' houses, and practice like classic rock, or at the time it was the early 90s, the grunge music and alternative music of that time,
Yeah.
and put together a set list of songs every month to go play a concert, either on the football field or in the theater. And that was like everything I looked forward to the whole month. And it was just fun, and it was community, it was connection, it was a sense of having a purpose beyond just fitting into this machine that was sending us all off to college.
I know, I totally agree. And I wish music was something that I had started earlier in my life. I picked up the guitar, honestly, over quarantine. I had nothing to do, a lot like a lot of people, and I just taught myself how to play guitar like 8 hours a day. And like you said, when you were talking about it earlier, there's nothing more soothing to ease worry, to ease anxiety. In my case, just playing a C chord on the guitar, like it's the most awesome thing in the world. And I wish I had that experience being in school, being able to jam out with other people. And I'm really glad that you had that at such a young age. And of course, it carried on into college, into adulthood. And you had quite the journey with the band, signing to a record label before you even got to college, and going through the whole journey where bands apart, coming back together. And it wasn't exactly smooth as soon as Songs About Jane came out. It didn't instantly become a hit. You had a long journey to even get there. And it takes from 2002 to 2004, really, of you touring to be able to see Songs About Jane to become like a commercial success. And I saw an interview that Adam was doing. He was on Conan, I think it was in 2005. And Conan was like, how do you go all these years and you perform the same songs and you don't get absolutely sick and tired of doing the same thing over and over again? And his answer was along the lines of, when you go out there and you create something like that, it constantly changes meaning over time for both you and what it means to the audience. So again, when we're talking about connection and being in tune with something that's just so important to you because you created all these songs, how does it feel to be able to create something for other people that they can come out and all those anxieties and all those worries that they're feeling in their day to day, you're able to provide them with a sense of escape, you're able to provide them with a sense of happiness?
Well, I don't remember that particular interview, but I certainly agree with the sentiment of what Adam said, and it's consistent with what my experience was, in terms of when we made the album Songs About Jane. We had a vision of what it would mean to an audience if people could hear it and like it, but really we were just trying to tap into our own sense of what was cool, what was expressing what we were, into musically, and what Adam was going through as a young man in his early 20s, in the lyric, in terms of relationships. It was all really from a place of self-expression. But when
Yeah.
you go out on the road and you start promoting this music that you spent all this time creating together, it takes on new meaning, and it sort of evolves over time. The way that you play the music evolves, the way that you relate to the crowd evolves, and the way that they relate to you evolves. So, like, in the first year of touring in 2002 on Songs About Jane, we were mostly just opening up for bigger artists. And so almost every show we played, with a few exceptions, nobody knew our music. Nobody had heard of us or had heard the album. Our single came out in the middle of that year, but it wasn't a hit until the middle of the next year. So essentially, every show was just, an audition.
Yeah.
It was just, let's try to represent this music the best we can, be short and sweet and to the point, and leave them wanting more. And so that was like a real challenge. No matter how many times you did it, every night was a fresh opportunity to turn on, whatever it was, 500 or 1,000 or 10,000 people in a room to your music, and hope that they want to go out and buy the record.
Yeah.
So that didn't get old. And then in 2003, as we started to play some headlining gigs, and we finally did our first headlining tour in the fall of that year, we started to see people, people kind of trickling into the shows that did have the album, and that we're starting to hear the single on the radio. And for the first time, you see people in the front row that are mouthing back to you the lyrics, and you realize, like, this music has meant something already to these people, and now it means something different to us, because you see the way they're moving to the music, you see the emotion in their face, or just the connection that they're having with us.
Yeah.
And that's a really special feeling. And so it's kind of evolved into this different thing. And then you fast forward into 2004-5, when we're blowing up globally, and you have massive success, and you have multiple hits singles on the radio, and people know you and your album very well. And they come to the show expecting certain things, and sort of wanting to have an experience. And then you almost have a sense of responsibility to both deliver something that they're looking for, but also take it to another level, and put on a show that's not just, at least that was our goal at the time, to not repeat and have it sound just like the record. A lot of people, I think, aim to just sound exactly like the record. At that time, we were trying to give something even bigger in concert than what was on the record. So over time, it evolved, and it became, I think it didn't get old for that reason, because every time we'd come to another town for the third, fourth, fifth time, it was a bigger audience, it was a different vibe, and our role as performers was a little different.
Yeah. And it's such an interesting position to be in that a lot of people will never be in, where you're getting to live out the dream of being able to perform for all these people, and they're starting to fall in love with you as the artist. But at the same time, it's that responsibility that you talked about. And I think the aspect that a lot of people don't recognize is the responsibility that you have to the connections that you're building with people just in the industry as a whole. And you describe it really well in the book, saying that you feel like at that point in your career, you feel like you have to say yes to every opportunity that comes your way, because you don't want to risk, potentially burning a bridge, if you want to use that phrase, or not making a connection when you have the opportunity. And this is when we get into like 2005, 2006, and the exhaustion really starts to set in. Do you remember there was something called Midnight Miles, which came out in 2006?
Mm-hmm.
You were quoted in there. Well, you had your own little piece, which was very similar to what you had written in the book, which I find is very fascinating. 2006 all the way up till now, same kind of thinking on the time. But you actually had a quote to begin your section of that book, and you quoted Dickens, and you said, "It was a season of light, it was a season of darkness, it was a spring of hope, it was the winter of despair." Which I thought also was really interesting, because I've heard you talk about how you view life in seasons. And at this point, the seasons are just kind of all blending together, because it's just constant go, go, go. And you don't even realize it at the time that you're malnourished, exhausted, dealing with coordination problems. Because, like you said, there's this responsibility that you feel. So during that time, do you think it could have gone differently? Do you think you could have said no in some instances, and that would have helped you regain a sense of maybe control, or maybe being more in tune with what your body was trying to tell you?
To be honest, at that time, no, I don't think there's really much I could have done to say no, or to create more space for myself, because I did try. I mean, I did try to say, I'm getting really worn down and burnt out, and I need time off.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you have to remember, this was 20 years ago. The public discourse on mental health was non-existent
Yeah.
compared to how it is starting to be today. Um, Not that it's even close to where it should be yet,
Yeah.
but at least we're having conversations about this stuff. Um, and I think that there was this sense that you only get one shot. when you actually have a hit record, when you're actually in the midst of this global promotional campaign, it's not going to come again if you don't, go after everything, strike while the iron is hot, right?
Yeah.
And that was advice that we had heard over and over again from before the album even came out. I mean, when we finished recording the album, our record label sat us down essentially and said, look, we're going to put you on the road for at least a year. If the album's doing well, it's going to be at least 2 years. If it does really well, it'll be 3 or 4 years. And we're going to pay for that. We're promising that we will pay for that, because touring is expensive, and not a lot of labels do promise that. A lot of labels will say, well, if you have a hit, you know, but then if you have a hit, they don't need to pay for it. So it's kind of a paradox, right? But they essentially said, look, be prepared to say yes to everything. And there was it was sound advice from a business perspective. And we heard this advice from other artists along the way. The Counting Crows said the same thing to us. Adam Duritz from Counting Crows. Bono and Edge from U2 gave us the same advice. It was kind of ironic at that point because we were already like 2 or 3 years into touring when they gave us that advice, but we appreciated it. They essentially said, look, when you say yes, the first time that you're in Ireland or in Australia or wherever, and you say yes, those promoters and those venues and those radio stations and those television, you know, whatever they're called. um, when you tell them yes, they're a fan now of your band. They're invested in you, in the success that you're going to have. And when you come back around, they're going to want to promote you more. They're going to want to book you again. They're going to want to be a part of this thing that you're building. If you say no, they're not going to ask again, and you've burned that bridge essentially. So it's basically kind of career suicide to say no. And that's what, Counting Crows, Adam Duritz said, they were enormous in the States in the early 90s whenever that first album of theirs came out. I mean, you could not turn on the radio without hearing Counting Crows at that time in history. And they were burnt out after a couple of years of touring and said no to going to the UK when asked to tour there because they needed a break. Mm-hmm. And he said, to this day, we don't do very well in the UK because of that. And so we were very mindful of that, and we were up for it, but we just didn't recognize, or I didn't recognize, the extent to which it was going to be taxing on, in particular on me and my constitution. And when it came to the point where I was breaking down and I really was having problems, it was almost too late at that point. I remember saying to our manager, like I really think I'm going to go down hard. And he was like, look, just hold on a little longer, just another tour, another this, another that. And I tried, and I did, and, it worked for a while. There were a number of months that I continued to just sort of like bear down and push through it, all the while getting more fatigued, more exhausted, and my body sort of starting to reject it. Yeah. Until I couldn't anymore, until it was so bad that it was just, there was no way for me to come back from it at that point.
Yeah. And I want to put it into context too, because for myself, thinking about the mental health conversation, particularly when this is going on for you, I was probably six or seven. I think a lot of the people in the audience were very young, so it's hard to remember the time frame. But in addition to the mental health conversation, also finding yourself in a position where you're finding stardom and celebrity in 2006, 2007, this is before the shift where I think nowadays we don't view your stereotypical celebrities like A-list movie stars, huge musicians. They're not seen as more mysterious or closed off. We know more about their lives just because we have social media and we feel more connected to them. But at this point, I'm assuming this is before social media is even invented. It's not easy for you to be able to post something to your fans and let them know, hey, I need time off. I hope you guys can understand. Am I correct in that thinking? And if so, how did the impact of celebrity impact your own psyche? Did it make you feel more closed off at that time? Or was it something that maybe I'm thinking about this completely wrong way?
No, absolutely. The times have changed pretty dramatically with the era of social media. When I think about the people that were my heroes, the ones that inspired us to start a band and set off on that crazy journey, you look at Kurt Cobain of Nirvana and Eddie Vedder of Pearl Jam and Chris Cornell of Soundgarden, and all the guys of that era that was the music of our coming of age as teenagers. They were reluctant heroes. They were not people that at least overtly set out to have notoriety or to be quote unquote influencers. You know, they were they were these brooding artist types, and that was what was cool about them. They were very uh, introspective, and cared mostly just about their art and about doing something really meaningful to them. And I'm sure internally there have been retrospectives on guys like Kurt Cobain, that said that of course he wanted to be a rock star. Of course he wanted people to buy his album and everyone in the world to like his music. I'm sure that that's true on some level, and that some of it was kind of just the tone of the time in terms of rejecting stardom. But at the same time, it just wasn't a good look at that time to be thirsty for the kind of public attention and to be fixated on just creating a brand or getting that kind of place in the public sphere. Now you fast forward to the aughts, and it's funny because I remember being on tour in probably 2002, 3, 4, somewhere around there. And the original four members, Adam, Jesse, Mickey, and I, were all from LA, and James, the fifth member that joined, was from Nebraska. And I remember James telling us that he was on this thing called Friendster at the time, which was like the first social media thing. And it was so foreign to all of us. And we were all teasing him relentlessly. Like, what are you doing, man? You're making friends online? You're such a dork. Because that was not something that cool Hollywood people did. It
Yeah.
was, it sounded desperate to us. It sounded like, something middle-aged people did that were desperate to find a mate, and that wasn't cool. And James was like, "You just watch, man. This is the future. Everyone's going to be doing this." You're right, right? And it really changed the dynamic. I mean, you look at how the way that people engage with each other has changed so much, and the way that people aspire to influence and to be a part of the culture. It's kind of brand first now. It's kind of creating a persona, creating an image. Not that image wasn't always a part of artistry. I mean, a lot of our favorite artists of all time are very image conscious. I'm not
Yeah.
knocking that. It's part of the expression. But I think it's just kind of flipped. It went art first and image second to now image first and maybe art second, a lot of the time at least. And so, it's just a different medium, getting out there and trying to promote yourself. I think you have to be much more mindful now of how you are self-promoting and creating this persona. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's a different time, and
Yeah.
I think that I guess the second part of the question that you asked was about stardom and how it shifted things for us. Um, in some ways, I felt like our world got smaller as the band got bigger,
Mhm.
because it's kind of hard for me to really understand what the phenomenon was when your album is omnipresent, and your songs are all over the charts, and uh, everything that was happening with the band. I think everyone was having a moment of discovering the music, and we were at the center of that storm, and so we couldn't really be a part of it. We were just sort of um, it was an interesting thing that happens. I mean, the music was everywhere. Even when we had a day off on tour and we'd walk into a mall or something, or go out to the movies, like our music would be playing in the mall or playing in the movie theater. And it was just strange, this music that we had recorded a few years earlier in a recording studio, and we'd be walking down the street in Tokyo, and there it was playing. And so it's just a surreal experience, and just feeling that you're sort of at the eye of the storm, and you're not really perceiving it the way that everyone else is. And then of
Yeah.
course all the things that can be a little alienating, like when you're playing a little club, you can walk right out after the show and say hello to your fans or the people that were there that night, and sign some autographs, take some photos, and have some fun just hanging out. When you're playing an arena for 20,000 people, you can't
You can't
you,
do
you
that.
can't leave your dressing room or locker room for that matter. So it can be isolating. It can be it's really just your little team that's in the trenches together. Um, I don't know if we changed personally that much. I know that for me, I think I did change. I look back now, and that time in my life was a weird anomaly. The things that mattered didn't matter at any other time in my life, um, and there were just the conversations when all of a sudden it was about the kind of the celebrity and about the parties you're going to and the people that you're meeting, and um, it just the conversations change. I remember hearing, some people in my circle having conversations about expensive watches and cars and things, which were things we never talked about before. That wasn't
Yeah.
we talked about the music. We talked about, how cool it would be to do something like Jay-Z or like Missy Elliott. Those were the kind of conversations that were going on about either music that we loved or music that we were annoyed by. But
Yeah.
it was always about what we were working on, and then all of a sudden there were other conversations that were going on about other things. So a lot of different factors come into the mix. But I think that Adam had the brunt of it more than anyone, because the front man gets a lot of the attention and the media focus,
Yeah.
and that's a place that I'm glad I never was. Being able to sort of hide behind the glare of those cameras that were focused on him allowed the rest of us to have still a little bit of anonymity. And it wasn't like if I was not standing next to him and I was just walking down the street, it wasn't like I was getting mobbed. But
Yeah.
once we had a major album, Adam couldn't really go anywhere without getting mobbed, and that really did change his life in a lot of ways. Not his personality, really. He was always kind of the personality that you see today in some ways, but I think in terms of the freedom and the ways in which that can be isolating.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that you bring that up because you can have that sense of anonymity, but when you're with the band, I feel like there must be a sense of obligation that you have to be all in when you're on stage. And I
Mm.
see it in conversations when we talk about touring and the connection that fans have with artists, particularly that artists, especially mega mainstream artists today. So like Shawn Mendes recently was in the news because he canceled his tour because he needed to take a break. Justin Bieber was having health issues; he needed to take a break. Another one really recently was Miley Cyrus, and she had a really interesting quote that I wanted to get your opinion on. And it's not necessarily the connection with fans, but it's more that image base you were talking about. And she is talking about ego in this quote. And she says, "There's a level of ego that gets overused when I'm on tour. And once it switches on, it's really hard to turn off. I think when you're training your ego every single night to be active, that's the hardest switch for me to turn off." And I
Mm.
think people give really negative connotation to ego. But when you look up the definition of ego, it's just self esteem. So when you're in this position as an artist and you're starting to feel the exhaustion really kick in, how does it feel with your personal self-esteem? Does it feel like, oh, I need to be selfless right now because I need to give myself over to the band. I need to give myself over to the fans. I have this obligation. And if I don't, it's going to hurt my own image of myself. I'll feel like a lesser person because I wasn't willing to, conversations around mental health in men, I wasn't willing to, strap up my boots and get back up off the canvas and that type of behavior.
Mhm. Well, as a therapist now, I think my definition of ego would be a little different, but that's just because I, studied Freud and all the,
Yeah.
the, the, the origins of that term. But the way that we use it colloquially, referring to the ego, in terms of just, as you say, self-esteem. Um, yeah, it's a weird circumstance to be in the middle of all of that attention, because I think at our core we all seek attention. I mean, it's not we talk about it like, oh, attention seeking behavior. A lot of celebrities, people that are actors or musicians, performers of any kind, are just making up for the validation they never got or something, or seeking attention and getting that. I don't think that it's that different from most people. I mean, we all, from the time that we're born, we want the attention and approval of our parents. That's sort of built into us,
Yeah.
and that sort of translates into the world. Hopefully, early on, we got enough of a sense of our own self and our self worth that we're not seeking to make up for something that was lost, and seeking that externally, when we can't provide it for ourselves internally. But even when you have that internally, even when you are a relatively well-adjusted young person with a stable ego, let's say, um, I don't think it's that strange to like the feeling of adulation or somebody sort of
Yeah.
validating what you're putting all this effort into doing. I think as it's also natural as a performer to go out there and want to put on a show, do what you do, and get the feedback from people that you're doing a good job. We all thrive on positive reinforcement, right?
Yeah.
So, but now you're in this situation in which it's extreme, right? And it can be addictive. You go out there and essentially you're getting much more feedback than the normal person does. I mean, the average person goes to work or school and they get a good grade, whatever, they get an A, they get a pat on the back from their boss, whatever, feels good. And it keeps you moving forward and doing the next task. But when every night you're going out and thousands of people are screaming your name, it's a little out of whack in terms of the normal things that you deal with in terms of your ego. So it's understandable why people in that situation might have a hard time coming back down to earth when they're living in that space. And also, I saw it firsthand. I think that to be a great performer, even if you don't have a lot of that natural self confidence, you have to pretend that you do. You know, um, there have been a few examples in history of performers that were very shy and introverted and looked like they didn't want to be up there, and it worked for them. In that era I described, there was a lot of the early '90s. There was a lot of what we called shoegazing performers, that didn't really emote and perform the way that you're used to a performer performing. However, if you look back at the history of performance and to this day, in general, most people want their performers to be larger than life, to
Yeah.
be personalities that look like they have supreme confidence and they can go out there and just take the audience by grab them in the palm of their hand and take them on a journey. So that's not to say that every performer who's ever been great has that level of ego, that level of natural self confidence, but they're able to tap into it to some way. And it sounds like that's what Miley was referring to, because I saw that with our band. As we got to a place where we were stepping up to another level, I know Adam in particular really felt the responsibility, as the word that you just used. And we all felt this responsibility to step up to that next level and be performers.
Yeah.
To kind of go out there and strut a little bit and to own the stage and to reach out and grab the audience with our music. And a lot of that fell on Adam's shoulders because he was the front man and he's delivering the lyric and the melody. And so he had to kind of adopt a persona that was much more, bombastic and self-assured and, drawing on our heroes, people like Prince, would go out there with his guitar and throw it around his back and grab the mic and pull it off the stand and just, basically have sex with the audience. Like, that was just epic. And to see somebody like that with that kind of swagger and that kind of persona, you just felt like you were having a moment when you were watching that. And so we knew that was a part of it, that's what people go to a show to see. And we had to try to emulate that to a certain extent. So you do kind of end up, I think, stepping into an alter ego, a part of yourself that may have existed all along, but you're giving it passage to step to the forefront. And now you're asking that part of you to come to the forefront on a nightly basis for an hour or two
Yeah.
and get all of this adulation and all of this instant feedback that part of you is so special and so great that in my instance, I actually felt my general self-esteem go down because you're if you have the self-doubts that I had, the insecurities and the anxieties, and then you have this one place that you're getting all this attention and adulation, it's impossible for someone like me not to have imposter syndrome, not to feel like, really, is this for me? Do I belong here? Are they cheering for me? you know and especially because I was a self-taught drummer. I never took any lessons. I was essentially somebody who was really great in the garage setting and being a local hero and feeling like I belonged in that space. And now you're in a space where the world wants a piece of you, and you're competing with other people that have been groomed as musicians from a very early age, trained. And a lot of the musicians, I mean, you look at somebody who's a very famous celebrity and they look like they belong there, but the musicians who are playing with them, they might have gone to Juilliard or trained a classically trained jazz musician playing pop music, And so it's hard not to compare yourself and think, do I belong here? Can I live up to this standard, or am I going to be a failure? Is there something wrong with me? Am I going to end up? Am I going to be discovered as not good enough? So I think that all of those self doubts and self criticisms and self judgment was leading to questioning myself more, and my self esteem actually going down over time as I was trying harder and harder to keep up with that lifestyle.
Really fascinating. And I know some people are going to struggle to be able to connect this to their own lives, but I hope that if anybody's in a team organization or if they're just working in a family unit, you can see the resemblance of this feeling of obligation to be there for other people, to hold yourself to a standard, which certainly is what happened at the time. And the other part that I really want to focus on is identity too, especially once you start to leave the band and the identity and the connection to the music. So your transition out of the band, you didn't just completely let music go. You shifted more into the producing role, both with the band and outside the band. I read you produced music for a band called Former Future. Is
Mm-hmm.
that true? Okay. So you're diving into other bands while at the same time being with your own band, but you're not in the same point with your identity. You're no longer the drummer. You're on a different side of the connection with the music, especially, a different side of the connection with yourself. Can you? I want to make an interesting connection here. At this time, you're having more nihilistic views on the world too, which you talk about in the book. How does having those nihilistic views in a combination with a changing identity at the time impact your self-esteem? Are you even caring about how you're truly feeling because you have this feeling, nothing really matters? Or is it more you're cognizant of how you feel, but you're not really caring about what's going on in the external world?
Well, first off, you really did your homework. Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, when I left the band, it was really devastating on every level because my identity was wrapped up in being a member of that band. I was in the band from age 16 to 28. It was something that I started. We started and developed in my parents' garage, and over the course of a decade, we took it to the biggest stages in the world.
Mhm.
And so, just as we were having that level of success and having invested that much of myself in it, to walk away, I had no idea who I was. I held on to the notion that I was a musician and that was at my core, and I pursued these other um, opportunities as a producer and as a writer, and did things like that, which was fulfilling in some ways, and a nice way to stay connected to that part of myself. And I always liked the creative process and the production process of making recordings. Um, so that was fun, and it gave me something to do. But I was also comparing everything that I was doing to what I had done with the band and what the band was still doing at that point, which of course was still even more successful than when I had been in the band. I mean, they continued to play massive tours all around the world, and so my self esteem had taken a huge hit already, and then in those years was going down and down. And I think that the nihilism that you mentioned was a reaction to that, because I felt so broken and so pained by what had happened and where I was in my life at that point, that I had to adopt this attitude of nothing matters at all, because that was the only way to not feel the pain.
Mhm.
Right? It was an escape from because obviously it did matter. It all really mattered to me. The loss of that career, of that connection, of that purpose, of that identity, it all mattered a lot to me. So I had to pretend that it didn't matter, um, and sort of strap on this alter ego again. That I was just I just didn't care about anything. I was just this rock star type who liked to drink and party and have a good time and play some music. And um, that was, I was definitely not very self aware in those at that time in my life, to put it rather bluntly. I I knew that I was in pain on some level. I knew that I was essentially escaping, or you know running away from the feelings, but I had no sort of real sense of how deep the wound was and what it was doing to me, and how the the things that I was doing to escape were making it the matter worse.
Yeah.
Um, so I didn't have a lot of self awareness. I didn't have a real concept of what I was really dealing with. I just had this pursuit of nothingness. I mean, the goal at a certain point ceased being feeling good, and it was just oblivion.
Mhm.
Because it was just too big. Everything that I was feeling was too big, and the gift that comes from that, though, now is recognizing that um, when I meet people that are in pain, as a therapist now, when I meet people as a speaker, as an advocate, um, I can understand it in a way that I think a lot of people that haven't been in that place
Yeah.
can't. Because I wasn't like that before then, and I haven't been that way since.
Yeah.
It was the lowest point in my life, and it lasted for a while, but it was a really deep dark hole that it was a perfect storm that got me there, and it was a perfect storm that got me out of it.
Mhm.
Um, but it was really a deep dark place that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. But when I see people that are in that place, it's familiar to me, and I understand that you didn't choose to be there,
Yeah.
and if you could be anywhere else, you would. You're just really looking for any way to cope at
Yeah.
that point. And the judgment that we place on people that may not have the best coping skills, whether it be addiction or other unhealthy lifestyle choices or behaviors,
Mhm.
um, it's just essentially doing the best you can to try to figure out how to get through this thing that's really, really painful. And sometimes it really it takes being humbled just enough, and asking for being able to ask for help and getting it when you just need it most,
Mhm.
to finally find another way of being. I didn't really know any other way of being at that point. That was the only skill set I had to try to cope with what I was dealing with.
Yeah. I think addiction still is one of the most misunderstood aspects of human nature, where we ourselves can't even identify it when we're undergoing addiction. And those on the outside either can't recognize addiction in some of our loved ones, or we do see addiction and we kind of write it off like, oh, this person should be able to get out of this. But that's not correct. And especially with ourselves, you talk about it. And I love the idea that you bring up of the illusion of control,
Mm.
where we tell ourselves, "Oh yeah, I can quit anytime that I want to, or maybe I'll just take off weekends, or like maybe I'll do like every third day or something like that," as a way to kind of say like, "Oh, I could stop anytime I want," but we're not recognizing the addiction that we're in. From a therapist lens now, can you describe to anybody who's listening who might have a loved one who's dealing with addiction, or maybe they are dealing with addiction themselves, what happens in the wiring of our brain when addiction takes place? What changes between a brain that's dealing with addiction versus what you would call maybe a healthy brain?
Well, it's a complicated thing that happens that we could spend probably a whole series talking about how that gets to that point, and what exactly actually happens. But to try to simplify it a little bit so it's understandable, just from um, a brain biology standpoint, at a certain point, um, your relationship to a substance gets hardwired into your limbic system. Essentially, it's no longer a choice. It now seems like survival, right?
Yeah.
And it's the first and last option you have to deal with whatever you're going through. Now, you don't necessarily just wake up one day like that. I mean, some people it gets to that point pretty quickly. For some people, it takes a long time to get to that point. But essentially, what has happened is you've identified this thing as the answer to your problems, because you were in so much pain or suffering. And everyone I've met since I've been in recovery, every single person I've met who has a substance abuse problem or is in recovery from a substance abuse problem is self-medicating something, right? some kind of pain. And it could be as literal as physical pain. It can be psychic pain, emotional pain, trauma. It could be, things that happened to you when you were a child. It could be things that are hardwired into you from generations of trauma. There are a lot of reasons why, but there always is a reason, right? There's a reason why somebody responds to a certain drug in that way.
Mhm.
And it's the first thing that felt like a solution. And it's unlike anything else in that, it's obviously so destructive. And if from afar you can see how destructive it is when somebody is continuously, drinking from a bottle or putting a needle in their arm or whatever it is that they're doing. You can see from the outside perspective how destructive it is. Um, why would somebody do that to themselves? Why would they continue to do it? It's a hard thing to understand, because anything else that is harmful, that is injurious, we have a natural instinct to pull away from, right? When you put your hand on a stove as a kid, you don't have to do that more than once, right? It hurts and it harms you, and you pull your hand away and you don't do it again, right? Why, when you drink to the point that you end up vomiting or you end up doing really stupid stuff or getting yourself in trouble, or every time you drink you end up in jail or you end up getting a DUI, or over the time, over the course of your drinking, you've lost all of your friends or your family won't talk to you anymore. Why would you continue to do it when you're having those kinds of consequences?
Mhm.
And so it's a weird anomaly in terms of the learning process, but essentially, the reinforcement of that relief that you get from the pain, that just shows you how great that pain must be. That initial relief that you get is so reinforcing that you're willing to do it, even though the cost is so great on the back end. So you end up building much higher tolerance. You end up building a literal physical and chemical dependence on it, and now you're so deep in that well that you're just essentially trying to get to zero every day. It's not even about getting high anymore. It's not even about feeling good.
Mhm.
It's just trying not to feel miserable. And people will be locked in that place for a long time. But and the other part of it is that denial and rationalization are so powerful, and it goes back to the ego. The ego, to refer to the more actual, clinical definition of the ego. The ego's job, according to Freud, is essentially to moderate between. It has two jobs: to moderate between the superego and the id. The id is essentially just trying to get your needs met, your instinctual drives. It makes you, want to eat, want to sleep, want to get laid, do the basic fundamentals of living, biological functions, meet those needs. But the superego is trying to fit within a society, trying to do what is, actually going to work best in community, and is going to get your needs met with the work of a conscience and those things. But the other thing that the ego is doing, besides trying to navigate between those two often conflicting instincts, is it's trying to prevent you from being overwhelmed by anxiety that's bubbling up from your unconscious. It's the thing that's mediating between your conscious mind and your unconscious mind. There's only so much that's happening in your conscious mind at any moment, and 90% of what's going on inside is unconscious. And those things can cause a lot of anxiety, whether it be trauma from your past, things that have been buried deep in your unconscious that you haven't dealt with, or just natural things that we all deal with, like the unknowns of life, the certainty of death and not knowing when that will come, the lack of understanding of what life means and what our connection is to that meaning. There's only so much we can take in terms of the level of anxiety that these things produce in our life. And if you have trauma in your past, if you have things that are complicating or making that even worse, it's easy to become overwhelmed. And so the ego's job is to find ways to relieve you of that, to find ways to make life more tolerable. And so the reason why we call them defense mechanisms is that it's ways of pushing those things away just for a time to make it more tolerable. And so denial is a way of just, I'm not experiencing that right now. That's not what's happening. This may be very painful, but not right in this moment,
Yeah.
because it'll get you through that day. Rationalization, is another defense mechanism where we say, well, maybe my drinking over the last few years has lost me a few friends, but if they're not my real friends anyway, I like having a drink. I feel like a better version of myself. It makes my anxiety go away socially. It makes me feel more relaxed. And so the people that are my real friends will understand that about me. That's called a rationalization, because we know deep down inside that it's harming us, that things are getting worse in our life, and yet we're holding on to one one thing that might be positive to try to define why the whole thing is positive. And so there's a series of things that our ego does to try to make ourselves more comfortable, to try to avoid that pain, that anxiety that bubbles up from the unconscious. And essentially, it's a survival technique. It's part of the reason why we're human beings and why we can survive the way that we do. But when you're in so much psychic pain and the ego gets out of whack, that's when we get into trouble, because now the defense mechanisms are outweighing and overpowering the actual things that are helping you survive and thrive, and they've become as much of a problem as a solution. And that's when the addiction is being fed into by those things, and it actually being enabled and supported by those ego defense mechanisms. And so you have to be humbled to a certain extent. I don't know if I necessarily buy into the idea that you have to hit rock bottom in a literal sense, but I do believe that you have to be so humbled by your addiction that you're able to surrender completely, to let go of those defense mechanisms that are actually perpetuating the unhealthy behavior at that point, and actually allow in other ways of living, ideas that might actually be helpful and actually be conducive to recovery, and to actually finding ways that you can cope that will allow you to thrive and not actually be self-destructive.
Yeah. The whole time you're talking about it, I'm thinking about denial and rationalization, especially in terms of a mental health perspective, where for a while, when I was in high school, college, I did a lot of both of those when it came to, oh, I'm feeling these emotions of, I don't know if this is sadness. I don't really know what the scope of this emotion is, but I'm just gonna pretend like it's not there because, it's gonna ruin what I have going on, whether that be personal endeavors I'm trying to do or some relationships that I'm trying to have. Don't even address it. It's fine. And I got to the point, once I graduated college, and I just let those emotions bubble up, and I got to a point where I was just like, oh my goodness, it's just eating me alive. I started to feel sluggish. I started to feel tired. I started to feel irritable because I wasn't allowing these emotions to come to the surface and actually face them head on. And the other thing that I want to focus on for this next question is I wasn't willing to share. I wasn't willing to open myself up to new ideas from other people and hear their feedback and hear what their strategies could be to allow me to change my perspective on the world, change my perspective on the emotions that I was feeling. I was so caught up in my own head, and it was so detrimental. That's the best word I can use. It was just detrimental to my physical health, to my mental health. So from a therapist perspective, again, I've heard you talk about how you kind of view it as an art form where it's not necessarily, one response fits all. Like this is the go-to plan for everybody to help them with their addiction, with their mental health. It's very individualized. And I hate the word individualized because people will say it and they'll never actually just like discuss what it means. So when someone is in a situation where they're with a loved one, they're with a friend, and they know that their words can make a significant impact on the course of how they handle their addiction or how they go about handling their mental health, what are some strategies you can give to that person so that they can help come up with an individualized answer to, hey, I'm here to help you. Here's some strategies that I think would be really beneficial to you?
Well, the thing to remember is that, somebody who has a substance use issue um, is inherently going to be defensive,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's part of that ego defense, right? And it's part of the denial and rationalization. So if you come to them offering them a solution to their problems, it's probably not going to be met uh, very kindly, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I always give this advice when people ask about how can you help a loved one that's struggling. Um, I think the best gift that you can offer somebody who you see in your life that's struggling is to make an effort to really understand what's going on for them internally, rather than jumping immediately to a solution or offering, a way to fix it or advice on what they should do, which is probably just going to, make them dig in their heels and kind of um, identify you as somebody who just doesn't get it. So the advice that I give is essentially what they teach you in grad school to become a therapist. The advice they gave me, which is that you'll make a lot more traction asking questions and just reflecting back to that person what you hear, than jumping right to advice or a solution, right? So, in other words, instead of saying, I want to help you, here's what you should do, showing a real interest in understanding what's going on for them internally. Because what happens is, essentially, we all just want to feel heard and understood. Like, that is a basic human need, is to feel seen, to feel heard, to feel understood. And when you're really struggling with your mental health, addiction or otherwise, the overwhelming feeling is that you're alone, that no one will understand what you're going through. And so you don't have to actually know what somebody's going through to give them the gift of empathy and compassion. And the way to do that it's not sympathy. It's not, oh, I feel bad for you. It's, I'm here. I want to hear. I want to understand. I want to listen, and asking the questions that facilitates them being able to voice things that they might not otherwise be able to voice.
Yeah.
Right? Because we all bottle things up inside to a certain extent, especially if you feel really alone and that no one will understand. If somebody provides you with that outlet, if somebody says, this is a safe space for you to let that out, and I have no agenda other than to just understand what you're going through, that's a powerful opportunity for that person. Because just in speaking what's going on for them, in trying to describe it, in trying to help that person understand, they're more likely to come to a realization about what they're going through and even find a solution than they are if you just offer them one.
Yeah.
The solution has to come from within. At the end of the day, even if somebody gives you great advice, like, it doesn't mean anything unless you're willing to apply it, right? And the best solutions are the ones that come from within, the ones that it finally dawns on you one day, like, oh, I am part of the problem. I'm doing this thing over and over again, and it's just keeping me stuck in this place. I'm the one who has to change it. I'm the one who has to, seek these things out, or make these changes in my life, or change these behaviors, or change the way in which I'm relating to myself and to the world. When you reach that place individually, because somebody has allowed you to have a voice and allowed you to work through it by bringing it to the surface, that's a powerful moment in your life. But you can't force someone to get there. No matter how much you lecture someone or give someone a sermon on what they're doing wrong and how they need to change, like, the likelihood is you're just going to be that much more defensive, and you're going to push back on it and find that many more reasons to be in denial or to rationalize the things that you're doing that aren't productive. So when you ask that question, when you give someone the ability to voice what's going on, you're actually giving them a tool set. You're giving them the opportunity to find their own answers.
That really struck me right there. Yeah, that's gonna sit with me for a bit. Is there any question in your life right now that maybe you still feel like you're denying giving yourself an answer to?
Whew. Yeah, of course. That's a hard question to answer a lot, because
Yeah.
uh, we all want to believe, and part of it's that denial again, that we're a finished product, but none of us are, right?
Yeah.
We're all a work in progress. Some of us are further along than others, but we're all exactly where we need to be in this moment. And I have no doubt. And I think that, for me, I try to turn those things into a positive. I try to turn them into an opportunity, because um, in sharing my story, as much as I am a professional at this point, and people look to you for a certain level of expertise that comes with that education and title, um, I also bring, in telling my story, hopefully, a level of authenticity and vulnerability that comes from not pulling punches and just talking about things frankly. It's a fine line to walk, but I think that it's helpful for people to not just look at, even the most motivational people, even the people who are essentially here to lift us up and show us a better way. It can sometimes ring untrue if they're just speaking from a place of, I've got it all figured out.
Yeah.
The reality is, nobody has it all figured out, and it's inauthentic to pretend that you do. And so, for me, that's the space I like to occupy, is that I'm willing to talk about the things that still challenge me, that the insecurities I still have, the anxieties I still have, and the things that I probably still need to work on or need to bring out of a place of denial, and into a place of surrender and openness to change. For me, I mean, the drums is still one major place. Um, it's, as much as I've overcome in my life, and overcoming addiction and the major clinical anxiety and depression and other things that I were challenging, I've become much better about my perfectionistic tendencies, my obsessive compulsive tendencies, a lot of things that I talk about. Um, the drums are and performance and being on stage and music in general is where my trauma lies.
Yeah.
And so things bubble to the surface in that regard sometimes, that I'm like, really, this still, like, I'm still going to this place, and this is still something I haven't overcome, and that can be frustrating, and my reactions to those things can be defensive, and it can be resorting to old behaviors that are not exactly the most productive in terms of working through it, pushing things out of my mind, or escaping or avoiding, or just beating myself up, self judgment and those types of things. And um, I'm more aware now. I have such more, better self awareness at this point in my life, that when those happening, I'm like, okay, I see what's happening, and you
Yeah.
know, try to jump to the answers quicker, than I did 20 years ago, let's say. But it still happens. I'm a human being, and I'm a flawed human being just like everyone else, and um, it's good to be mindful of those things.
Absolutely. And if there's anything I could say about your book, it's that it's definitely authentic and it's 100% vulnerable. Uh, and I gave you flowers before you even started. The way that your book resonated with me and how your story resonated with me, and being lucky enough to have met you in person before I even read the book, uh, just everything about you, what you're doing for so many people, it's it's amazing. And I know this is only the start of this chapter of your life, which is really crazy too. And the amount of people that you're going to impact, who knows, which is a beautiful thing. And I just thank you again for being here today, sharing your story. I know it meant a lot to me, and I know definitely it's going to mean a lot to somebody who's just hearing this for the first time. Um, so to end off our show for today, I want to ask you the show staple question, and that's, after everything that you've gone through so far and everything that you learned, what have you learned in particular about love?
Hmm. Wow. I could spend a whole hour talking about that. Well, I've learned that love, if you ask 100 people, you might get 100 different answers as to what love really is.
Yep.
And, in my own life and as a therapist, it's always interesting to see the different ways in which it manifests, and the things that we call love sometimes that don't look a lot like love, and the things that we don't even sometimes think of, um, that in my mind constitute love. And um, I like to use the word love interchangeably with the word God. I'm not a religious person. I don't believe in a specific deity, per se, even though I was raised Jewish. Um, but I do believe that there are things that unify all of us, and when we connect, you started this whole thing off with the idea of connection. Um, when we connect to something bigger than ourselves, and that doesn't have to necessarily be a God.
Mhm.
It can be a person outside of ourselves. It can be a community. It can be a passion. It can be a purpose. It can be music. It can be, service. When we connect to something outside of ourselves, to me, that's love. And it comes in a lot of forms. It comes in the form of communing with another person in a romantic way, in a platonic way, or when I was 12 years old and beating on the drums for the first time.
Yeah.
That was love. Even as much as it might have just looked like angst and aggression. It was there was love in that. I was reaching out to the world with what I was doing. So that's how I like to look at love. If I have a working definition, it's part of my spiritual definition. Spirituality was something that I never really had a working definition for until I was in recovery and had to.
Mhm.
And to me, it's all about connection. It's all about reaching out and belonging to something, and and something else outside of yourself belonging to you as well. When you have that connection, that is love and that is spirituality to me.